Thanks so much for this wonderful introduction, and compliments also on the timing. We Germans can actually learn from how precise you are starting the lecture series here. At the end of such a busy day, I'm presenting a lot of images, which hopefully is a pleasant final generator for discussions in the presentation, where it's a lot about new materials, new products, an exchange of a business that's really important to shape our interior lives and our the world, how we build and live, and how we feel, what comfort is, what norms are, what conventions are, and traits like this are always important to kind of discuss the state of the art. I'm showing you work that actually tries to question these issues with small-scale interventions, objects, interior, urban planning schemes, and also buildings. And what you see today is an obsession that starts, which was mentioned earlier, with a collection, a very personal collection of patterns that we are collecting for about 15-16 years now. We call them data protection patterns, and they come on the inside of envelopes or of shipping slips when you get a PIN number from your bank on multiple forms. These are patterns that kind of strategically divide between a private and a public, between an inside and an outside, between a discrete and indiscrete, between a kind of personal and exposed condition. Think of how we deal with data nowadays. It's a question on maybe how we redefine issues of privacy. Maybe this is a topic that is kind of obsolete at some point. But it's something that actually takes an invention here from like late 19th century, early 20th century into a contemporary discussion on how to deal with issues of information control. You all know all these discussions on social media and how much accessibility there is or misuse of private information. It's all part of this discourse, how we actually live in a social community context. These patterns come in all kinds of shapes and dimensions, and here you see, for example, letters. They come as patterns. We use them as a starting point to explore surfaces, to discover kind of new materials in architecture, to push the limits and redefine the discipline of architecture. These are objects we designed for Bisatze, which are glass mosaic tiles put on polyurethane foam. And when you actually sit on them or touch them, they are quite soft and elastic. So there's a certain approach of surprise here, which means that the body in relationship to our built environment, to the touch, to the interactivity of body and space is an important factor. This is kind of an old material, reinterpreted as a new kind of sensorial experience, but we also try to look into contemporary materials like temperature-sensitive paint and pigments that are tracing the human body temperature landscape temporarily on an object. So here also the surface became something that is related to our body, but also kind of discloses certain information about biometric issues. So in a context where body is becoming a new information source for security, for, of course, sensual pleasure, for a lot of products, for beauty, for aging, all of these issues become part of an architectural thinking. We also designed a couple of products. These are eyewear that deals with asymmetry of the human body. They were sold a lot in Japan, surprisingly. This one was the bestseller. And these are all objects that try to understand the body as a source for our built environment. Going back to the temperature-sensitive paint and also the patterns, here this is a bedsheet set that also traces our temperature temporarily and has kind of a temperature shadow following us while we roll in bed, while we sleep. So you never sleep alone anymore, there's always somebody kind of with you. These patterns come as letters, they come as kind of more abstract patterns, they come as pointy moire effects. These are all found patterns. When you get your mail, every day you'll find this in your mailbox, and for a collecting material is actually a very nice and easy and cheap way to collect something. This is also patterns from logos of companies, cross-hatchings, even more abstract shapes, more cross-hatchings. it became kind of a source material for us. A primordial soup, you also heard this from Jerzy Seymour today, is somehow finding a base, a kind of a substance where you can start to extract, to interpret, to create meaning with. And for us, it's this kind of pattern collection. And step by step, we are looking into this layer of mediating between inside, outside, private, public, exposed, discrete, to understand what the spatial potentials are for these in this information society. So this was an installation enlarged into a scale of the human body for the Berlin State Museum. This was the main room, all carpet, printed on carpet. And you can also see it's the same pattern as we have on the Kia car on the other side, where numbers and letters are kind of embedded in a more abstract, overlarged field of graphic design. But more importantly was this little part here. These are cubes that start to explore three-dimensionally what we try to do with the carpet in a larger scale. There was a rule that in these 3D plotted patterns, from one side it would look like the original pattern, the found pattern, which is up here. But then when you turn around, it's a complex three-dimensional labyrinth and structure that is an interpretation of this 2D pattern into a depth, into like a deeper spatial structure. And then when you look close, this is then what you go into. This can be seen as somehow a filter or a reading element, a reading device on our larger architectural pieces. This one is an exhibition design for Autostadt, Volkswagen in Germany. It's an exhibition on mobility and sustainability. And if you take, I go back one sec, if you take the recycling triangle up here, which seems to be such a simple symbol for how we produce and consume in a sustainable way, we know now that it's actually much more complex. There is a completely different set of judgment rules, dead ends, something that was kind of correct yesterday. Remember, biodiesel, for example, turns into something problematic like half a year later. All these dead ends, but more complex interdependencies are kind of shown in this abstract network of maybe an artificial forest-like structures. And all these embedded information screens that we have there are the places where you can go deep into information on sustainability and mobility, or you walk through it and get more of a feel and understanding. They have about 2,000 to 3,000 people every day going through these spaces here. It always gets updated constantly. This is an interactive waterfall, and you touch it and it actually creates certain letters and texts and guides you through an understanding what mobility and sustainability means. We are now working on an extension of this. If Level Green, which was the name of the exhibition upstairs, was for an age group 15 and up, now we're working on the same issues, but more on a bionic, sensorial, motoric learning process for 2 to 12-year-olds on the floor below. And this is the diagram that you see here is kind of the roots, the stem for the green, lush upstairs that now becomes a playground, learning, cooking school, sensorial learning, a 3D movie theater for all these kind of issues. So it really becomes another exploration ground for people interested in mobility and dynamics. This is then the material that goes into it. It becomes an even more complex structural system than what you saw for the Level Green upstairs. And this is going to open in May, in a couple of months. On a larger scale, this was an earlier project. We designed a dining hall for University of Karlsruhe. And what you see here is a skeleton that also thinks of enveloping a space in all three dimensions, but more in a structural, skeleton-like system. It is in between the city and a forest, so it has also this ambivalent situation between being a building or kind of a forest-like structure. But for us important was the elasticity of the design process from a floor to the ceiling and all the kind of gooey space in between that would fix the roof at some point when the program is distributed quite originally or effectively. So this, we call it Nutellagram, was somehow the reading device to understand this elastic space in between roof and floor. then we froze the program, we froze the process, and started to re-architecturalize it in these skeleton-like structures, balconies, beams that we see. We won the competition with a very precise and fixed budget, which is kind of the budget for a public building in Germany, and had certain problems to find the way to build this other kind of architecture within this more conventional budget. It forced us to do a lot of research on how to build this, how to use materials and structural possibilities within that financial situation, and came up with a building that is quite unique now and became a prototype for sustainable construction in Germany. It's a timber construction that is prefabricated, put together on site, and then coated with a polyurethane coating, and I'm showing you pictures in a second. A dining hall is kind of a machine. Half of the space is just production, food production, delivery, you know, trash, storage, and cleaning, while the other part is then the space for meeting. Here you see the structure. It's a laminated wood. It's called Courthouse. It's produced in Germany. The wood comes from Finland. It comes in plates 2 by 40 meters, so you can cut out basically any shape you like. And from that point on, basically, since this material was invented, you have to think timber construction in a completely different way. It has much more strength for larger spans, for completely different geometries. And then when you put it together and you spray on this polyurethane coating, this is a system that we developed for this building. You can also reduce the metal flashing, for example. Everything's kind of coated with this water resistant and weather protecting layer of the building. Support the idea of this continuous surface, something that wraps from the floor to the roof, that includes all architectural elements. And you see it here, for example, there is no metal flashing here, there is no change of materials where the water hits it. It's a really interesting skin idea of a building. This became crucial for the multiple parcel project that was mentioned earlier, which I'm showing at the end. On a larger scale, and this kind of shows in this presentation how small ideas kind of grow step by step, and of course each project comes with a different challenge, with a different connotation and dimension. This is a courthouse in Belgium, in Hasselt, just finished. I think it will be opened in April, finally, this year. Here we have the wood structure as part of the facade. It's not the inside structure, but it's all the kind of the supporting glass elements and then the final layer of the beams on the facade. Here it's a master plan by West 8, and I think you also have some architecture by West 8 here in Toronto. This whole park situation is a master plan by West 8, and there was a competition for the architecture on the master plan, which we won with a team of 2 architects from Hasselt, Lenz Ass and A2O Architects, and ours is also the first one to be built. We get some spaces here. These are early photos of the interiors, but it's really a scale change for Hasselt next to a train station where it becomes a new landmark for the city. Another commercial project, office space project, and I like to show this because it shows that normal, standard, open floor office plans don't ask necessarily for boring buildings. There's still potential to actually do something different and special also for a spatial experience. This one here is a kind of small building in Hamburg next to the waterfront, and you have in each floor 3 rental units, and each unit has one of these kind of winter garden balconies where you can step into the facade, kind of a little bit outside of the building to get fresh air, to explore a different kind of view, and to have the chance for maybe a different, more communal space or a lobby or a meeting room area behind these moments in the facade. Here you see the floor plan, very rational, straightforward. This would be then these eyes looking out onto the landscape waterfront of Hamburg. And it also creates a certain relief, a certain three-dimensionality in the facade where you can step into. We were also able to do the interior, so this idea of the relief on these eyes translates also into the structural idea. You have this precast concrete ceiling here. We also did the furniture. 3 floors were rented by an advertising agency, so they really understood the concept of the building and went all the way through into the building. This is the meeting room, for example. But it also happens on the outside. There's a small park in front of it, and the city allowed the owner, the developer, to redesign the park, which was kind of run down. And for paying for the redevelopment, he was able to build a little bit more square footage. And it reflects the building also into the ground, and we do this a lot in our buildings, that we don't see the architecture just as the shell, but we try to develop the idea all the way into the building, but also all the way into the landscape and into the surrounding. A house that does this much better is a villa near Stuttgart. This is a building that was finished about 3 years ago, and the client came to us and said, we have this house here, we don't really like it anymore, but we are emotionally attached to it because this is where the family started. In '84 we built this house, and this is how it looked. It was a house actually by a student of Sharon. You can still see it somehow. There was like a central column and some radial beams. Not much more than that. Some kind of interior stepping landscape ideas. But with every kid and more money, it was transformed. Every balcony became a window garden, became a room, or the pool, outdoor pool became an indoor pool, became an extended pool, and so forth. So it was quite a messy structure. And the client said, we don't really like it anymore, it doesn't work anymore, but how can we keep a certain idea of this home, of this kind of place where we founded our family? So we decided to call it family archaeology and use the footprint of this grown house, take this as a design guiding device, duplicate it, actually rotate the new building out of the old one, of the old footprint, and have 2 layers of privacy, similar to the dining hall where the footprint and the roof and this elastic space in between. Here it's a floor underground, or like a basement floor, which is private, an upper floor that's private, and in between the more public areas that mediate between these 2 layers of privacy. This is the location. It's next to a river, and we were lucky because the site here is still an industrial site. If the building would sit here, we wouldn't be able to do a flat roof, then we would have to do a pitched roof. But since it was on the other side, we were actually quite flexible with the design of the building. What you see are some elements from the old building, for example here the pool or the stone wall, so we have certain references and still some leftovers of the old building, but it's all kind of packaged and coded into this and covered with this new design. It's somehow a symmetry design where you have a horizontal line that this part is the same height as this one, the window is the same as this one here, it flips around, and then everything kind of gets packaged within this white coating, which looks so simple when you look at it, but actually this makes it even more complicated because all the detailing that comes behind this white wall, this white surface, is different from the very top to the bottom. So here you have a wooden attica, timber structure of the roof with a masonry wall. Then it goes into a concrete wall with a polyurethane coating and stucco all the way down to a tartan floor on the grass. So this blanket is actually, which looks so simple, asks for an intelligence of detailing and constructing behind that white wash that you see at the front. Some of the plans, these are partly found, or let's say, walls that we needed to keep from the building before. This is the central floor with a central atrium and then 4 rooms around this, and the top floor. All the cantilevers happen because of this rotating the lower floor out of the basement, and creates these beautiful overhangs and shadowing overhangs and the spatial conditions inside it. Some images from the interior. I don't know how they live in there now. We were not able to go into the building after they moved in, so there were some furniture pieces as references, but I don't know how it's decorated now or how they really use and live in the space. This is the pool downstairs. Here again you can see the symmetry line that would be around here. This is the same distance as this one here. The windows have the same proportions with the frame. So it's all kind of a very playful idea on the eye level of the main living room. Another housing project we worked on and got finished about a year ago is in Berlin. It's our first Berlin project finally after 10-12 years. It's next to a landmark building from the Baroque times, which is here, and there will be some building facing it or neighboring it at some point. It's a building that's an all-glass building to get a lot of light and air into the building, but then we also had to deal with some kind of privacy issues, where you have, of course, views into the apartments, and that's more critical even in the backside, in the courtyard, and this is where the idea of these slats developed. The side is here, the green part is the building. In Berlin you usually have a front house and a side wing. That's kind of a typical typology for buildings. And normally you have quite nice green courtyards. So we take the green of the courtyard as part of our building and have it step up and become part of terraces and outdoor areas in the back. Now in this angled, this is a firewall. In this angle situation, you also have then the view from, perpendicular views from other apartments. And this is something where we felt if there's a bedroom or a bathroom behind, we would like to actually to block the view, but still have a lot of light exposure in this kind of narrow court. And this is somehow a diagram of privacy or exposure, which also, of course, translates into a diagram like this, for example, and an overall diagram of like beautiful view, blocking view, and discretion. The inside also takes this landscaping idea into the living room areas. We have these sunken parts which become the seating areas and the couches, and you get the imprint of the same idea from the apartment above you as a little kind of sunken ceiling, but then you also have the same condition for yourself, and it creates a certain form of comfortness also within the floor plan. These are now the views in the courtyard, for example, or up on the terraces back into the building, or inside one of the sunken areas in the apartment. A house we just finished, and it's not really published yet, also near Stuttgart. It's a small family house for 4 people. We also have a lower floor which is more private. This is where the entrance is, and then the upper floor which is also private for sleeping, and the living room areas in between. And this is the central staircase, which in this case became the sculpture that rotates kind of the spaces around it. And I think this is one of my favorite photos here of the space. It really becomes this soft melting element that guides you through the whole building from top to bottom. Two high-rises that we just won last year, and we're working high speed on this one here. There's another one that takes a little bit longer because it's in the building zone process. The first one, the higher one, which still takes a little bit longer, is on a 5-degree angle and kind of plays quite up there with all other angled towers that we know. And this will become, I think, one of the landmark buildings for a new contemporary Düsseldorf. It might be a company's headquarters, we are not sure yet. There's also a hotel part of the complex, and of course office spaces and more commercial spaces. This is the building here. It's part of a complex that you see here, also around the train station area. This is something that you see happening now all over the world, and I think it gives a lot of potential to inner city areas that are, not really necessary anymore for cargo or for industry, which can move out and brings another liveliness and urban space quality to cities. So these 2 blocks are done by Delugan Meisel. They won the competition for this part. We won this one here with the high-rise, and we're very excited about working on this one. If you look at it from the other high-rise, which is the view here, so this would be the other building I just showed you. This now here becomes an apartment building, also high-rise a little lower, which is on the River Rhine. For those of you who know Gursky's photos, his famous photo Rheinblick #2 was actually taken here on this side of the river. So it's kind of, for art history, an important site. It is also important because it has a hospital here, which is important for Düsseldorf, and the development of new housing projects around here. We won the competition for the corner piece, which is a high-rise for 6 floors of doctor's offices, and then about 12 stories, 14 stories for apartments above. And here we also take the facade that I showed you earlier in Berlin, this kind of light veil, but more as a kind of a wind device, kind of a security device in terms of if you sit on a balcony in a high-rise, you know, you have a certain feel of protection. And we are now in the phase of trying to figure out what kind of materiality and spatial option we have for this curtain facade here. This is the mix of program. We have 6 floors of doctor's offices, and then the other ones are different typologies of apartments. And I think that's something I would like to explore, because there's so little done in high-rises for apartments. Also, when you look at what's built here in Toronto, there seems to be kind of a standard that works, but there's also potential, I think, to come up with another form of architectural contribution, also in the segment of housing high-rises. A larger project, maybe the largest one we're working on right now, is the country of Georgia. We got invited to actually work on a site in Tbilisi, which then didn't happen, but it was the beginning of a conversation we had with the government and then some companies in Georgia, and it became somehow an intervention, kind of an acupuncture project, where all the blue dots that you see here are potential sites of what we are working on. The first project, however, that got built is this pavilion that we didn't know it was going to be built. We were called like a year after we sent some sketches for some public buildings. In this case, it's a pavilion cafe in Batumi. And then they said, would you like to come and talk about a courthouse? And I said, well, what happened to all the other designs? Oh yeah, when you can come to the opening of this cafe and structure. And I said, well, I don't know that somebody built a cafe and structure. Oh yes, it was built. And I said, well, don't you feel like you need to talk to us? We didn't get any money at that point for it. So they were a little embarrassed, but even more embarrassing somehow, so this was the built piece. Even more embarrassing was that somebody liked it so much that they renovated the neighboring building and put a facade on it. So I talked to the president and said, well, it's a little strange to start a relationship, you know, like this. And he said, well, take it as a compliment. It's a fake Rolex, isn't it? I said, well, okay, that's a way to look at it. It was the beginning of a lot of other, like a whole set of really interesting projects. So this one here is the first project we built. It's in Sarpi, which is the border station between Georgia and Turkey. Maybe the most beautiful site we ever had. It's here on the water. Georgia goes till here, and this is Turkey. So we were asked to design a building that is a checkpoint, a border station, yet at the same time it's not meant to be a separation line. They saw it more as a place to bring people together. So we also have congress rooms in there. You can actually rent the spaces. There are terraces to overlook the countryside and of course the Black Sea. This is the structure, and I think it's quite impressive that a country sees a border station as part of an architectural intervention, that's part of an architectural culture, and also wants it to be something that's friendly, that's welcoming, or that's kind of friendly saying goodbye to you when you leave the country. And you see, it's not also a kind of a dangerous place. People are bathing, you know, till the Georgian border. Turkey looks a little different here, but it's still, you know, it's not something that you try to feel you have to distance yourself from it. This is the checkpoint now. You have all the meeting rooms on top actually of the checkpoints. You can rent spaces here. There's a terrace. There's of course a little watchtower up here. This is one of the views from the meeting rooms that you can rent on top of the checkpoints. So it's really impressive to see how infrastructural and government buildings actually can be part of a change how people experience the country. These are some images of the structure, and we were very happy when actually Azure put it on the cover. So thank you again. This was a very great moment. Another project building we did is a small airport in Mestia. It's this little tiny building here, and maybe it's our fastest project ever. We were called in August, I think it was August 24th, and they called us and said, we need a design tomorrow. We need the drawings in 2 weeks, and it will be opened on December 20th. They opened it on December 24th, so it really worked. It's a very tiny airport. It's a place where you can only really get by airplanes in good weather. It's up in the Caucasian Mountains. It's a beautiful landmarked World Heritage Site. You see all these beautiful stone towers, and they needed an infrastructure that actually brings the tourism, which is part of the new idea how to bring business to Georgia, into also these really important, beautiful cultural regions. This is the waiting room, so you have a very simple building. It's one finger is the tower, one finger is the check-in and security, and the other finger is like the waiting area and the cafe. And this is the view in winter. We also did 2 more buildings. This is a little town hall in the same little village here, and you see how it plays also with the old wooden structures from Mestia, and this is a small police station that we finished also in the same town. This is concrete, on-site concrete. Another important project, I think, are 2 rest stops along the highway that is built now. It's a new highway, actually the first highway that's running from Tbilisi all the way to the Black Sea and to Poti and Batumi. And its infrastructure and transit is an important economic factor for Georgia, which also means that for some people, like the border station, the architecture along that highway is maybe the only thing that you see while you're actually passing. And again, to understand a rest stop as an architectural undertaking, as a piece where you show what your concern is also in terms of architectural culture for a country, is pretty impressive. So these are 2 rest stops that we designed. It's a gas station, it's a cultural space, they have some kind of exhibition space where local arts and crafts can be shown. There's a farmer's market hosted underneath the roof, and a little supermarket. One version was built by a Georgian company, which was on-site concrete and very well done, so we're very happy with how it was built. This is the gas station here. The other one was built from with a Turkish company with steel structure and precast concrete elements on top of it. So it's also interesting to see how different local traditions and construction traditions changed the way how things got built. And when we went there for the opening, it was, I think the biggest compliment was that people said, oh, they already have 2 requests for their wedding parties in the rest stop from Gori, from the neighboring villages. So you see how much there is need for something else. Gori is actually the hometown, or the town where Stalin was born. But in these cities, nothing really happened in the last couple of decades, I guess. And only in the recent years, there's a change in the dynamic and kind of a transformation that brings Georgia to become kind of a country of today. And these are all important factors to actually make this happen. We are also working on a villa right now in Tbilisi. This is the President Palace here, and this is a private villa. I think the government wanted to control how it looks when the president looks out of the window. So there was a small competition that we won, and this is the villa that we're building right now. This is still a rendering. This is a facade fabric to actually test how big it would be and if it works. This was before the construction started, and now we have some images from the concrete works that are maybe 3 weeks old. The last project I'm showing you from Georgia, we are still working on 3 more, is a sculpture in Lasika. Lasika is interesting because there is no town yet, but the idea from the current president is that there should be a town for 500,000 people. There's a whole kind of immigration happening from Asian countries, but also with the war that happened against Russia, there was a part of the population from Ossetia and Abkhazia who moved into Georgia, and they need actually a new home, a new place where they can live and produce and work and enjoy their lives. So Lasika here on the Black Sea coast is a new development. What happened so far is a big boulevard, I think like 5 lanes in one direction, 5 in the other, and 2 roundabouts at both ends. and a small town hall next to it, to this boulevard, nothing else. It's a flat land, and we were asked to design a sculpture in the center of one of the roundabouts. We designed it, it got approved, they liked it, and at some point I said, well, actually, this was our imagination. If it's a busy city, you know, this becomes part of a street life icon. But what happened is that the government decided to move the whole project into the sea. Now it's part of a pier. It's at the end of a 150 meter long pier in the water, and now it makes much more sense. It looks beautiful how it sits in the water. These are some wireframe renderings. We worked with Helbig engineers on this project, and this is how it looks now. It's soon to be finished. I think it's another 2 or 3 weeks, and then they're gonna inaugurate it. So it sits on this pier. It is this kind of anchor for this new town that might not happen yet because the government just changed. So we don't know if it's actually going to continue. So it might sit there just lonely in the Black Sea, waiting for people to come visit. Completely different metropole power zone. No, I'm not finished yet. I'm not finished yet. Should I hurry up? Okay, now Metropole Power Zone, and then I'm done and you can go home or have drinks. This is our most important project, which we won as a competition in 2004. It was a competition that asked for a completely new idea of public space for the 21st century. There were a couple of issues involved with it, which I'm going to explain in a second. There was actually a food market there before. There was Roman ruins they found when they tried to build a parking garage. It's in this very center of Seville, the largest medieval downtown of Europe, as we were told. Everything that you see inside this oval shape is actually medieval downtown center. This was the expo site from '92. This was the last time really that anything happened contemporary in Seville. But compared to this huge dynamic that happened in around 2000 plus minus, Seville never really was part of that boom. And as part of, let's say, a competition between the different cities, also to attract certain interests, like international interests for tourism, economic growth and so forth, local competition with other cities in Spain, or let's say national competition with other cities in Spain, and of course to try to reactivate this very center of the city was the guiding idea behind this competition. The lower part of downtown was quite well developed, all the shopping, the institutions, all this happens in the south. The northern part was a little shady when we were starting on the competition. It completely transformed now, not only because of our project, but the idea was to bring the lower part dynamics into the upper part, the northern part. This now is a completely lively nightlife area. It's called the Soho of Seville here, a lot of design shops. This was a really kind of dangerous red light district in 2004. This is a view on the city, and you see how kind of beautiful it sits in there in kind of connection to the other larger institutions like the cathedral, like the cathedral here, or the bullfight ring, or the town hall with the plaza in front of it. It's one of these larger objects that define a public space, a public gathering in Seville. The idea was to bring in a big roof as a shading device to create a nice or an acceptable atmosphere in the very hot summer months, but also to introduce a different kind of programmatic idea of public space. It sits at the very center of all these central roads that go through the city of Seville, and this was the situation at the beginning of the competition. After the market was torn down in the 70s, there was an idea to build a parking garage for cars, of course. The walls were digged down, or were built down 40 meters into the ground. The earth was taken out, and then all of a sudden there was a Roman city. They found mosaics, oil lamps and so forth, and that's when the whole idea of building this parking garage stopped. The competition asked for keeping this window into the history of Seville, as much as bringing a contemporary life, a contemporary architecture into the center of the city for the people of Seville. This was the market that was there until the 1970s. It looked pretty beautiful, it was run down, it became dangerous. I think nowadays we try to save it and actually keep it as a structure. In the 70s the idea was take it out, bring actually cars, allow more cars into the city to make it part of like an understanding how new technologies work in the city. Now, since this was a temporary situation for about 30 years, the whole attitude about cars in the city changed. We now have pedestrian streets, there's public transportation, city will build a tram line, they're also working on subway lines. So it's a different understanding what an inner city actually should look like and how you're gonna live with it. But at that point, this was the starting point for the garage. We entered the competition with a very kind of vague idea how to work with this shading device and make this the main element. We worked in sketches, in 3D models, in computer models. The roof was always the guiding force behind this idea, and then we were kind of putting all the other program into the project afterwards. The layering of the program shows you the different public spaces, and it's a public-private partnership, which makes it for us architects quite complicated because we mediate between the city and the private company who is also financially involved in it. But I think in the end we succeeded. The project is about a 110 million euro project. 30 million go only into the archaeology, and the rest is divided by the city and this private company. The company then has 40 years of making profit before it goes back to the city, and they can kind of try to find the next person who runs it. The layering is an archaeology museum that's public. Then we have the ground floor, which is the market brought back as kind of a local food market with some commercial and restaurant areas. Then we have an elevated roof that is actually a different kind of public space that can be used for special programs and events and rented out in a different way. Then we have the roof with a restaurant and event spaces and the skywalk. It's exciting to be here in Toronto, also to show this work, and I hope that also architecture like this can be part of the city life here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, my name is Richard. Just wonder whether or not you have been considering or looking at any projects in North America.
We are working right now on our first building, which is a house in San Francisco, so that's exciting. But we were working actually on the competition of the Dunmouth River here, Don River Mouth project, which we didn't win, but this is when we looked very closely into Toronto. It was exciting to do that.
Thanks.
Hi, I really love your projects.
Thank you.
Of us, probably. I just have one question regarding the air pollution and the noise pollution.
I don't hear you. Can you speak up a little?
Noise pollution and air pollution.
Yeah.
I understand that when you are covering the whole structure with the polyurethane, it can be kind of chemically dangerous. So how do you deal with this? Do you have special facilities, or you have to, were you planning work outside Germany or somewhere in Europe? It's different. But when you go to Asia or Eastern Europe, how do you do that?
But with the projects in Seville, we were covering it inside a hall. In Karlsruhe, we did it on site, but it was sealed most of the time. But the problem is the polyurethane is not so problematic because it doesn't have any solution in it. Like there's no, it's called solution. Like there's no liquid that's actually, I don't know how you call it. It's a solution, right? So it actually hardens within 0.3 seconds. So it's a mix that is sprayed on site, and actually it hardens right away. So there shouldn't be really a problematic situation with at least the fumes, the smoke that gets out of it. Maybe the small particles are a problem, and you have to actually do that indoors if that's possible, at least when you're close to it.
Have you designed your own home?
No.
do you plan on doing that?
I don't think so. I mean, I live now in an apartment for 16 years, and I still feel it's temporary. So there's something wrong.
Is your coding system proprietary, or is this, because of course it seems a very interesting coating for using on wood, and since we
I'm sorry, I hardly hear you. Can you speak up?
Oh, sorry, is your system proprietary, the coating, the polyurethane coating, or is this something, a coating which can also be used by other people?
No, it's a product that you can buy on the market. We developed it for the first time on the wood structure, but it actually comes as a sealing device for flat roofs, for example, where nothing else helps. You can spray it on anything, basically. Or it comes from sealing and water protection for parking garage or bridges, for example. But there are a lot of different polyurethane coatings, and you have to talk to the companies to make sure that you get the right one for this, for basically the needs that you have. Okay, I think it's time for drinks. Thank you.